Hi, I'm Mac Flynn, Turbo Product Manager for Diesel Ford, and this is Turbo Learning Time with Mac. In this short video, we're going to discuss how turbochargers normally fail, or at least the most common failure modes within turbochargers, and how to add value back into your business, whether it be for the technicians, whether it be for parts counters or customer service reps, or just as an owner to be able to upsell and both teach and instruct your customer on what's going on and what you're seeing. The beauty of turbochargers is they see everything that's going on with the engine, whether it be the air coming in through the intake tract, through the air filter, whether it be the exhaust gas energy and exhaust gases coming out of the engine, going through the turbocharger down into the downpipe, oil, that's the quality of oil, the cleanliness of the oil going through your engine and through the turbocharger. As turbochargers are more widely adopted and used for creating better emissions, smaller engine packages, putting a turbocharger on it, creating more or creating the same amount of power, so elevating fuel economy, as well as just turbochargers decreasing in size due to aerodynamic efficiencies. It's putting more and more load on the turbocharger, the rotor group, the bearings. And in this video, we're just going to touch on what we see at Diesel Ford as being the most common failures for turbochargers. So to start off, this is a very broad term. It's kind of one that fills a lot of different areas, but it's the most critical one. It's the one we see the most of, and it's improper lubrication. So what could that be? Anything from oil feed line restrictions, oil dilution, so you have coolant and or fuel in the oil, improper oil weights being used. Very critical, as we'll find out later, how important using the right oil weight is, or lack of proper oil pressure or oil volume. If oil pumps starting to fail, if bearing tolerances or clearances are starting to fail or widen, oil pressure starts to drop and volume starts to drop. Oil level within the engine if you run it dry. And then the other one would be improper bearing priming procedure. So we see it unfortunately quite often of a new turbocharger coming out of the box, being installed on the engine, no priming procedure done to the turbocharger, and firing the engine, allowing the rotor group to spin, bearing to metal contact, completely dry, no oil. And then the last one is contaminated oil, which is normally debris in the oil. So to start it off, I have an example. This particular application was a Subaru. The shop had pulled a turbo off, said the original turbo failed. We asked them, why did it fail? They said just the rotor group, it just broke, old age. Turbos just don't fail due to old age. That's what we're trying to drive here. We really want you to sit there and think, when you're pulling a turbo off, if the turbo failed, or if it's showing signs of failure, why? Just to get that mentality of what's causing that turbocharger to fail, to really sit there, dive in, and understand, because it's just going to help you upsell other services, as well as make sure your customer doesn't come back under poor circumstances if the turbocharger fails again in a short time. This particular one, like I said, customer put it back on the engine, and we had asked them, why did it fail? Why did the original one fail? And kept saying old age. We with every turbo that goes out the door, we state common failure modes, what they should check, how to check those. And in this instance, the turbocharger didn't even leave the shop. So good indication of improper lubrication failure is you'll see high bearing transfer onto the turbine shaft. So bearings are normally made of a bronze material. That bronze is obviously softer than your stainless steel shaft. And so once this started rotating, engine fired, bearing to shaft to bearing housing contact creates an incredible amount of heat. So you see all this bluing, this discoloration on the shaft, your obvious transfer, and you even have heat up to the hub bore where the turbine wheel and turbine or in the shaft are welded together. On this particular one, you can see the brass and other material have started to come out, and more importantly, if you know much about journal bearings or a free-floating bearing within a turbo, there should be oil feed holes here. There's not. It's smeared over. The sheer heat and friction wears the holes closed to the point where there's oil feed holes in here, or shown in this bearing on a side-by-side comparison, that one has holes, one doesn't. But this was obviously drilled holes. It might not show it up on camera, but I can see the oil feed holes on the ID measurement. But this turbo didn't leave the shop, had barely any time on it, and in a matter of seconds was catastrophic failure. The bearing tolerances at this point, and the key thing to remember, turbochargers for the most part are very simple devices. All it is a turbine wheel and shaft, compressor wheel, a bearing, could be one bearing, could be two bearings, some seals or piston rings that don't move, don't do anything. They just allow, well, they do something. They allow pressure differential from the turbine side and compressor side to enter the bearing housing and to control oil flow a little bit, as well as override the pressures that the crankcase is producing going up through the oil drain. But outside of that, that's the majority of it. Now there are some exceptions and to like VGTs that we'll review in later time, but the big portion of it is they're very simple devices, but they operate at very high speeds, create very high temperatures, and have very tight tolerances. So in the smallest of small turbochargers that see very high rotor group speeds, you can have bearing to shaft tolerances or bearing to bearing housing tolerances down to 7 micron. That's how thin your oil film layer is. 7 micron is smaller than a human hair. Average human hair is about 70 micron. So when you have shaft to bearing contact and or bearing to bearing housing contact, you end up opening up those tolerances. Those tolerances are there to create a pressure, a dynamic pressure to float. Since these are a full floating bearing system on this particular application, they are both the turbine wheel and shaft, compressor wheel as a rotor group, the bearings are floating in films of oil. And when there's no oil, or when the oil has issues, contamination, that film strength decreases, and contaminants go through it, and you ultimately get this excessive wear and bluing on the shaft. So this is lack of lubrication, but just lack of oil. Oil never made it to this bearing housing. On the next example, this was also almost an instantaneous failure, but it has a little bit different signs to it. Still same common signs, and throughout all these failure modes, it doesn't matter what manufacturer you're dealing with, whether it be Garrett, BorgWarner, Holset, IHI, Mitsubishi, ABB, large ships, they all will show the same failure modes when you run into improper lubrication. It's congruent across the board for any turbocharger. You'll see these same failure modes, and it's crucial that we start to get in the mindset of when a turbo fails, let's pop it open. Not encouraging you to send a turbo back disassembled, but I am encouraging you to do a little investigation to find out what happened. Turbos just don't fail, and we want you to start thinking about that, because it's just gonna increase revenue for you, consumables, oil changes, and other services to provide the customer. So this particular one was a Volvo loader. Original turbo failed. Don't know the backstory on that one, but the customer did replace the turbocharger, and it failed instantaneous. And if you're in comparison to the other past example, you don't see as much discoloration compared to it. Slight bearing transfer, but it's mainly just black. You have some discoloration on the thrust bearing assembly, but more importantly, you see some discoloration on the thrust collar assembly oil slinger. But the big key sign that this didn't have oil, and the difference between the two was oil made it to this one, the one that we're reviewing now. The past one, oil never made it and never got to the turbo. And here's how you can see this. So in this example, you have bearing transfer, discoloration, where both journal bearings would have been floating. I mean, as we talked about this, bearing in a shaft are floating. They should never touch. And when you have a wiped clean area on both sides and then this hard friction in the middle, this is all oil coating. Oil, as soon as it got to it, the shaft was so hot. I mean, it has to be 550 degrees or hotter, depending on the oil weight, to coat onto a shaft, that by the time it got to it, it just coated directly onto the shaft. The bearing wear was already there. It was already extreme damage. So by the time the oil made it, it was done. In this particular application, there was an oil feed line restriction, but more importantly, because of the run from the cylinder head or wherever the oil feed supply was directly into the bearing housing was a very long line. This particular customer didn't have a lot of experience replacing turbochargers, put a new turbocharger in, and did not prime it. So what is priming? So as oil, you have to build positive oil pressure in the turbocharger assembly before that engine ever fires. It's called a dry fire. You don't want to do this because it's just metal on metal, and at idle 10,000 RPMs, maybe for something maybe a little bit slower, it's still incredibly fast, and it's just going to wear it out. So it's always crucial when you go to, before you fire the engine, have that mindset. Tell your technicians, tell your customers, do you know to prime that turbocharger before starting the engine? On gasoline applications, a lot of the times are passenger vehicles. A lot of the times you can pull a fuel pump relay, fuel pump fuse, and sit there and crank the engine for a little bit, 30 seconds or longer, to make sure that oil builds pressure. It's even smarter to do that with a bucket or a cup or something with the oil feed line off and crank it to make sure adequate oil flow is getting to or getting out of the line. It then gives you a more comfortable feeling that if you're priming the turbocharger with the oil line on, you can actually see oil flowing through it, or vice versa. So big key, make sure good, clean, adequate oil flow to the turbocharger is there before, and pressure is built so it can go through all the journals and crevices of the turbocharger, lubricate thrust bearing, thrust collar, all the journals, the shaft, and get through the turbocharger and out before it fires. This one did so much damage so quickly that you now have, there is a tolerance, but it shouldn't be like this. And in comparison, the turbine, this is the turbine side bearing. The turbine, it did so much damage that it eventually made wheel to housing contact, snapped the turbine wheel off the shaft. But this being the turbine side bearing gets a lot more heat because the engine's running. And you can see the tolerance between this is quite loose compared to the compressor side bearing, which is almost nothing. It's still something. It's still way more excessive than it should be. You shouldn't be able to really rock it like such. And coming into here, and it's just, yeah, hot dog down a hallway in that sense. So on to our next one. Oh, mind you, also, it took so long for oil to get to this thrust bearing that it even coat onto the thrust bearing. There should be the pads. These are your thrust pads. It's also a ramp, so as oil flows through the bearing up through these valleys and comes out here, it creates a pressure zone, creates a hydraulic effect to center itself between the thrust collar. This slides in here, and oops, this slides in here, and there's an oil film that allows it so it centers the rotor group and allows no axial play, so play back and forth with the rotor group. These pads are completely worn down, they're cracked. You have oil coating everywhere, oil coating on the other side of the thrust pads and ramps. One thing that we're starting to see, and it's more critical than ever, especially with passenger vehicles, smaller rotor groups, tighter tolerances. So as an engine burns fuel and it creates carbon, and carbon settles into the oil, and if your oil filter is not of OE quality and doesn't filter out small enough particles, that carbon can eventually build up into enough of a mass that it ends up creating almost an abrasive, a sandpaper. Starts to wear away at the bearings, the shaft, the surfaces, and loosens those tolerances, increases gaps between the bearing and the shaft and the bearing housing. But more and more we're seeing manufacturers push oil change intervals to be longer and longer. And while a good high quality synthetic oil of the proper oil weight can normally handle that, the concern is, can the filter keep trapping all that media? How are the other filters being treated, specifically the engine air filter, or if you're on a diesel, the DPFs, DOCs, SCRs. Maintenance is key to making an engine last and a turbocharger last. Good quality, high clean oil, crucial, and the proper oil flow. This particular one was a vehicle, Nissan Juke to be specific. This uses a Mitsubishi TD03, and the owner brought us the turbocharger. Younger gal who just bought her first new to her car, and set it up on our counter. And as I was walking by the counter, if a turbo's up on the counter, I instinctually go and look at it, and I started to notice things instantly. Some huge signs, critical signs that something's wrong, something's going on. Not outside of the turbocharger failure, but what I'm about to show. This is the oil drain. This is all oil inside the oil drain of buildup, sludge as we call it. This is the bearing housing. This is all hardened oil. These two holes are oil feed holes for the thrust bearing assembly, thrust bearing and thrust collar. Oil is literally sludged and pushing out of it. As we see, this is your oil feed. It's a little bit harder to see on this one. As we see people push and manufacturers push oil changes in intervals longer and longer, this is what it does. Not only is this going to be in her turbocharger that was shown, it's going to be in her engine. It's going to be in the oil feed lines. It's going to be in the oil drain lines. It's going to be in the valve train, the oil galleys. Unfortunately, I do think they got the car up and running, but had to pull the pan, pull the oil drain tube, pull the oil feed line. They said it was completely clogged. They actually took pictures and showed us that almost no oil could get through this turbocharger by the time it failed. And it was really refreshing to see that after we had said that to them and pointed out these signs, they went that deep into it because they didn't want it to happen again. They can't let their, it was a daughter and a father who had came in, they don't want her being stranded. And you can see the lack of oil flow because of all that sludge or the oil quality. I mean, sludge is not going to lubricate a bearing system, and if it does, it's not sufficient. It's not doing enough to create a film layer. It's creating a sludge layer. So you can see the heavy wear, bearing transfer, oil coking, the bearings. I mean, it was just incredible to see these bearings with this much oil on the outsides, on the sides, just clogging every single orifice of this turbo. We'll show good thrust bearing, not. Good thrust bearing, not. This is oil coating. This is oil sludge. This is not going to do anything for a turbocharger. It's not going to support anything. You can actually see severe wear. This should be almost flush, if not elevated. You can see the ridge lines in the thrust bearing. I mean, this thing was doomed, and luckily they did as much as they could to ensure that when they put their new turbocharger back on, that they weren't coming back. And we walked them through priming procedures, and they had shown us how much work they had gone into. But just another example. The other things that you can see is, commonalities. If you tear a turbo apart and there's excessive bearing clearance or bearing transfer, heat, look at the oil. It's a good indication. Most manufacturers turbocharger manufacturers actually require you to change the oil and filter when putting a new turbocharger on, because not only does that ensure that the turbocharger will be getting good, clean, high quality oil, but more importantly, it also really gives you time to look at the oil and see what's going on. Smell the oil. Does it smell burnt? Does it smell like excessive fuel? If excessive fuel, whether it be diesel or gas, is in the oil, it breaks down that shear strength of the oil. The oil can no longer, because it's so diluted, it can no longer create a film strength between the shaft and the bearing. So if you have fuel or coolant in the oil, it's not a good lubricant. That's why they don't use them. If you have excess in there, it can't create that boundary layer, that film layer between the rotor group, so it can float. So really take time to sit there, examine the oil, look at the filters, look at the oil feed lines, look at the oil drains, and more importantly, look at the turbocharger. Look at what's going on with the bearings, the thrust bearing, the thrust collar, the turbine wheel, compressor wheel, every part of it. It will give you such a good indication of what has happened or what is happening with the engine that's causing failure, this turbocharger failure, because reality is a turbocharger should last the life of an engine in optimal conditions. So the next one we're going to touch on, if any of you are know much about turbos, it's something that's widely heard, FOD, or foreign object damage. Surprisingly high amount of foreign object damage turbochargers come in, and it's the easiest thing to spot, and it should be one of the easiest things to prevent, and that's what we're going to talk about. So anytime foreign object happens, it is always going to start and be on the inducer of the compressor wheel and or turbine wheel. And to start with the compressor side, to talk about the inducer, it is the portion of the compressor wheel that is first getting air, ambient air through the intake tract, compressing it, sending it out the volute into the intercooler and engine. So this is your inducer. This top portion here, this would be an exducer in your back face of the compressor wheel. You can see all this pitting and ding marks and bends in the inducer of the compressor wheel. It is amazing that how many times we see a turbocharger fail, someone throws it on, didn't take the time to look at the intake tract, and the actual old turbocharger failure had left some debris and contaminants in the intake tract. Only thing upstream of this portion of the turbocharger is the intake. That's it. There's no other turbocharger components above here other than your compressor wheel nut, but most of the time they're reverse rotation and they don't come off unless the bearing or the rotor group has fully seized or improperly torqued, but more than likely the rotor group seized and spun the compressor wheel and compressor wheel nut off. The other good indication is, get this out, is all this pitting along the intake volute. This is from whatever was contacting this compressor wheel as it's rotating at very high speeds, it's just dancing around there, it's pinging around. You can see just how much damage it does. And eventually, and depending on the material, we've seen it where you have nothing left of the compressor wheel except the hub assembly. So all the pins would be gone. It looks like a Christmas tree, and they call it Christmas tree. It's incredibly damaging. You affect performance of the turbocharger, as well as it affects balance. So balance, not only does balance increase longevity, but it also increases or decreases noise output from the turbocharger. So if you ever see this on the leading edge of a compressor wheel, look at the intake tract, because we've even seen it where poor quality air filters being used break, delaminate, the glue comes away from the filter media, goes through the intake tract, hits the compressor wheel. I mean, it's just, most of the time, it's just an aluminum material for the compressor wheel, whether it be cast or forged milled or titanium. But at really high speeds, plastic can do that kind of damage. Transversely, on the exhaust side, turbine side, the inducer portion of it is here. This is what first gets exhaust gases after it's entered the turbine inlet and volute. So this is what gets the exhaust gases, and then the turbine wheel profile pushes exhaust gases out into your downpipe. So whenever you have damage on the leading edge or your inducer of the turbine wheel, oftentimes it is foreign object damage. And on the turbine side, it's a little bit harder. If you do see foreign object damage, it could be from various things. We've seen anything from a bolt to a nut to exhaust valve seats to exhaust valves to spark plugs, bellows breaking. So on diesels, a lot of the times you have a Y pipe or up pipes connecting into one common turbine inlet. They start to come apart. So if you ever see foreign object damage on your turbine wheel, there's a good chance that something's either coming apart in the motor, something was left in the motor. We've all dropped that one bolt or nut and can't find it. It happens, it sucks, but it happens. I've seen tools, sockets and wrenches, unfortunately. So when you put a turbocharger on, pull up the intake tract, shake it out, clean it out, pull the exhaust system, the downpipe, the up pipes, the manifolds, and again, look at your old turbocharger. I mean, this also shows all the impact damage onto the vane assembly. This was a 6-liter Power Stroke. It's a VNT Garrett turbo. You can see all the pitting. This should be smooth surface here. It should be a smooth surface here, and it's not. It has all that pitting on the effectively exhaust outlet of the turbocharger, leading edge. You can see where it had some drag marks along the turbine housing. It's just a really good indication that something happened, something was left in there, or you have an engine that's starting to come apart. It's cool when you get to find a valve seat and an exhaust valve and a turbo, just because it's kind of an oddity, but it sucks because you know that you're going into the motor again. Though if you catch this, you find out what happened, that's again an upsell, because if you put this new turbocharger on with an exhaust valve, seat issue, or a natural valve or something else, up pipes, bellows, the turbo's going to run poorly. It's not going to perform at optimal, and that customer is going to keep coming back. They'll look at the turbo. You'll probably think the turbo's not performing well, but really it's the engine's not performing well. The engine's not creating enough gas energy, exhaust gas pulses to turn the rotor group effectively at high enough speeds to create boost pressure. You don't have good compression. It's not allowing a good clean burn. If it's going to have blow by and leak down issues. So always a good thing to check. Make sure that the old turbocharger didn't have any foreign object damage on the turbine side or compressor side. It's easy. It's normally just pulling the turbine housing off, which is either a V-band or a coupled clamps. And same with the compressor side, you can normally have it off in a few minutes. just a good insurance piece. Going deeper into the rotor group, a little bit harder. The final thing that we're going to touch on in this video is emission component failure. It's on the rise. EPAs are making it harder and harder to meet their regulations, and so manufacturers are having to come up with emissions components that help really get to those emission level standards. Both with turbocharger manufacturers, because rotor group sizes are getting smaller, but they're also adding increased aerodynamics and then VGT or VNT for the turbochargers. So this next one, and it's critical, we're seeing more and more turbochargers be pulled off from an engine where the customer thinks the turbocharger bad, but in fact it's failing, or maybe it did go bad, but it failed due to something else. Most common one we're seeing right now is DPFs, either broken substrates, having broken substrates, not allowing adequate flow out of the turbine housing, through the downpipe, out of the exhaust, creating excessive bad pressure, or being clogged. We at Diesel Ford, after learning a lot more about DPFs and when we brought our DPF line to the market, found out that most cleaning solutions, shops or that have a DPF cleaning machine, it doesn't clean enough. It's not adequate. It still leaves up to what we saw was a pound of ash still left in the substrate of the DPF. And the problem that causes, that I stated, was excessive back pressure. And what does back pressure do? Well, not only does it create, it doesn't allow exhaust gases to get out of the exhaust system. That air has to go somewhere. So it starts pushing back, reversion, I believe it's called reversion, back through the downpipe up to the turbo, and it starts to stall your rotor group, slows the rotor group down, increases heat exponentially. You can end up collapsing piston rings on the turbocharger. It increases wear on the rotor group, thrust bearings, especially thrust bearings and thrust collar. It can create so much pressure that it actually starts, so this is turbine wheel, compressor wheel, it starts pushing back, the compressor wheel back towards the compressor cover. And in this example, it's filthy, but this was a Max Force engine, and you can see it's just falling off. This is all carbon ash buildup. The DPF didn't flow at all. It was creating, this is a very extreme example with this, because normally you don't see it this heavy, but you'll still see excessive carbon and soot buildup on the turbine wheel. What effects does this have? Throws the rotor group out of balance. It obviously makes the rotor group heavier. Exhaust gases aren't going to flow around that stuff. It's going to flow into it, but it's not going to do anything. It also, it's significantly heavier. I wish you could feel it, but it's significantly heavier, and it's that excessive weight's going to put excess load on the oil film layer between the bearings, allow oil to be dispersed and eventually start hitting, having either bearing wear, shaft wear, and or eventually allowing the rotor group to hit the housings. Another thing that we're starting to see is EGR cooler failures. Having ended up getting coolant into the turbine housing, into the turbine inlet. You can see on this example, it's almost like a crystallization. You start getting crystallization on the turbine inlet. There's a vane patch assembly that sits here, your VGT arm that would be moving the vane patch assembly, high carbon buildup. But when you run into this, you can see all the rust on the bottom side. That's where it would have been draining out of the bearing, or between bearing housing and turbine housing seals surface. This just gums up VGT mechanisms. If you see at any point coolant or water, moisture in the turbine inlet side of the turbocharger, so what I'm going to say is into your turbine inlet, it varies per turbo how it looks and everything, but if you ever see coolant there, you have an engine gasket, head gasket issue, block issue, or you have a cooler issue. it is almost inevitable that if you have water in your turbine housing, it did not come from the turbocharger. We see it a lot. We get a lot of submissions saying turbochargers failed, coolant into the exhaust stream. We pressure test the bearing housing up into the coolant jackets up to 100 plus PSI, which way exceeds a normal coolant operating PSI, and nothing. It doesn't bleed off, doesn't leak, doesn't do anything. We point at the engine, point at a cooler, and guess what? An engine issue is found. So if you ever see coolant inside the turbine housing of a turbocharger, instantly go to there's something else going on with the engine or emissions components. It's 100% of the time, and again, you're adding value. Not only are you adding revenue for your company, but you're making sure that this customer is not going to come back and have a repeat issue, because guess what? If coolant's dumping into a turbine housing, it's not going to last. The VGT will gum up. If it gets so bad where it's somehow, if it's an engine related issue like a head gasket, it'll start eventually find its way into the oil stream. You can end up doing damage to your main bearings, your rod bearings, camshaft, whatever it be, turbocharger, and it could be completely catastrophic to the point where a full engine replacement is required. That kind of touches the three major ones. There's a ton of other things, but I hope this gives you a foundation to start to really open that mind and say, we're going to replace this turbocharger. What caused it to fail? The reality is it's more than likely the turbo did not fail on its own. It failed due to a maintenance related issue, an engine related issue, negligence, whatever it be, improper oil weight, dirty oil. Please look at it. It's crucial. It just helps you, your customer, your fleet, whoever it be that's watching this video, take the time to sit there and think, before we put a turbo on, let's make sure why our previous turbo failed, so that we can protect our investment and our money and maximize dollars spent. So I'm Mac, and I appreciate your time. Please visit Diesel Forge's website at www.dieselforge.com. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and I appreciate it. Have a good day.